We are surrounded at all times by a huge manifestation we call the universe. There are those who understand this as the multiverse, as the omniverse, but essentially the universe, a grand cosmos. And that this manifestation functions ruled by laws fashioned in a mathematical and orderly way, with mathematical precision, and furthermore with a clear sense of purpose. The evolution, the evolvement of everything in it, incessantly pursuing perfection. There have been revelations in my life at certain moments where I knew without a doubt that the only reason why I had made it through a particular episode, Dark Night of the Soul, the only reason why I was still alive at that point, after scratching my head and thinking, how in the hell am I still alive, was the fact that I knew deep down that I had a unshakable knowing and intuition that the only reason why I was still alive was because I was willing to learn from my mistakes and evolve, incessantly pursuing perfection. To assume that an organism of such stupendous proportions, complexity, and precision, talking about the universe, could have issued from nothingness and is merely a fortuitous concourse of atoms is an idea as absurd as that of God portrayed as a venerable gentleman of advanced age and a European countenance. Let's discuss the idea of the existence of God, of the source. And let's further focus on the popular notion of God, what it is, if anyone even thinks about God this day and age, if they're even concerned with something beyond their immediate physical desires. I was going to say needs, but people aren't looking to live within their needs, but rather through their desires. But what is in the mind of most people when they think of God? Well, let's begin with the mind and its analytical capacity to determine whether our ideas about God as taught in the West make any sense. The main one, and obviously the most prevalent, presents to us a God as a venerable looking old man with a long white beard and a grave look in his eyes, a kind of cosmic father sitting on a throne somewhere outside or inside of the universe, from where he presumably rules mankind. And we are told by organized religion, that this being is infinitely perfect, infinitely powerful, infinitely just, infinitely loving, and of infinite intelligence. Other than being invariably described as a man, his aspect, talking about God's appearance, varies in accordance with the physical aspect of the inhabitants of the country where this God is venerated. In Europe, his aspect is European. But in Africa, he has African looks. And in Asia, his features are Asiatic. Now, dear esteemed viewer, honorable, noble viewer, and notable viewer, a teaching that portrays God as a glorified human being that looks like people of the race one belongs to is a childish notion that no educated human being of average intelligence should ever take seriously. If you do, please seek help. Hit the subscribe button and stay along for the ride, because millions of such people accept it Millions of such people accept it because they have abandoned talking about this childish notion of God's appearance. They accept this as a default notion of God, as their what they think of as God, because they have abandoned their thinking capacity precisely with respect to the very issue they should devote their best thinking efforts. They should devote their best thinking efforts towards. But that imaginary God is someone they can understand, someone that fits their emotional needs, someone they like, even if the idea obliterates rationality and common sense. But once the idea of that personal God has been examined, a number of difficulties with it will arise. We are being asked to accept as logical the existence. This is what is in most people's understanding, their vision of God. Is this logical? We're being asked to accept this as logical, as normal, as truth, that the existence of a God of infinite love, of infinite power and wisdom, is remaining indifferent at the sight of terrible human suffering, especially among children, and suffering caused towards children by the representatives of God's institutions on this earth. Talking about the Vatican, organized religion. Moreover, we are told by Christian fundamentalist Jesus freaks, we are told by Christian fundamentalists that this God of infinite love, goodness, and compassion punishes his children with an eternal hell if they don't follow his indications, being that he is a jealous and angry God. And the objection put forth on this by those who are not members of Western religions is perfectly reasonable. Any person of average intelligence, when they examine what is the notion of God in the minds of most people, will understand this is absurd. They tell us, but is it illogical? Is it logical to believe that a being considered absolutely perfect could exhibit such low human passions? And further, being perfect, could he possibly have created imperfect beings such as we humans? And further yet, is it reasonable to assume that having created us imperfect, a feat for which he could only be the only responsible party, he would threaten us with eternal hell unless we display perfect behavior? Now, the argument brought forth by Christian fundamentalists that human beings such as Adam and Eve were created perfect, but that both sinned, defies logic. Since perfect beings cannot, by definition, fall into any sin at all, precisely because they are perfect, and temptation has no power against that. Perfection is perfection, period. And sin, to miss the mark, sin is the result of imperfection. Clearly, that mythical first couple was not created perfect. If it had, human history would not be tainted with gore and brutality, and the world would be a veritable paradise instead of a dark place, a fallen planet, a veritable valley of tears brought forth by our imperfections. This, of course, entirely discards the idea of God as an infinitely perfect being, since nothing imperfect can issue from infinite perfection. And such is the position of those who deny the existence of the God they've been presented with as the real God, and we cannot deny the validity of their objections. If what we really want is to provide our neighbors with a viable idea about God's existence, We need to come up with something that makes sense. Now, as stated before, the blind faith in some of us happens as a result of our emotional needs. Well aware of this, the clever people among us, the clever ones, use the opportunity and tell us, for example, "See how painful and difficult your life is, my son? But never fear. Here I am to offer you salvation. I am in touch with God, you see. I represent him here. My name is Jesus, and he has told me to tell you that no matter how difficult your life may be, when you die, you will go to heaven if you join my religion. This I can guarantee." This is the regular speech by those who engage in proselytism for their religion. The problem is that there is a huge amount of religions, big and small, all of them teaching things which sometimes both are very similar and at other times quite different. And the sincere individual in search for information and reasonable answers to his legitimate questions concerning the existence of God, life after death, and the purpose of life is made to navigate in a sea of total confusion. And as a result, he turns atheistic. Those who don't remain in ignorance. And we may well determine what God is not using logic and common sense. The fact that some may harbor wrong or childish, infantile, immature notions as to the nature of God in no way discards his existence. Thinking people will invariably reject simplistic notions about a subject as transcendental as the existence of God. Now, I'm going to present to you a definition of God that, in my estimation, is accurate and satisfies all criteria of a rational mind and an intuitively active individual. There is one eternal, infinite reality. There is one eternal, infinite reality. One incognizable, unfathomable, real existence, underlying all manifestation, all phenomena, but unknown and unknowable by the finite mind of man. Meaning that rationality will only take you so far. That is where intuition comes into this laboratory experiment. There is one eternal, infinite reality, unfathomable, unknowable by the finite mind of man, by the limits of rationality, one unfathomable, incognizable, real existence, underlying all manifestation, everything you see, all phenomena, but unknown and unknowable by the finite mind of man. Now, this is a pretty abstract definition, and this may be considered just as another opinion based on faith and believability, credulousness. But what in essence tells us is that our maker is something, the source of all creation, the source of all that we understand is something that the human mind is unable to define, hence unable to comprehend. Clearly, we are here because someone or something made us. If you agree, please hit the subscribe button and leave this video a thumbs up, as it helps to spread this message of light. And some modicum, some measure of sanity where the holy God force, the holy light of the God force is concerned. Because a lot of times a person's God force is eradicated at the mental level, and they have to suspend the limits of their rationality and accept their intuitive understanding and thus free their God force. Namaste. Namaskaram.